Hi, I'm Steve, you. Welcome to DigiVice. Today we're talking to Darren from Financial Planning Queensland. He's going to talk about what we can do to minimise our budget and how we can plan for the uncertain future ahead from a financial perspective. Hi, Darren.
Fire away, mate.
Awesome. So you're a financial planner, and you're pretty much going to offer some suggestions on how we can minimize our budget and just prioritize those things that are going to keep us afloat rather than everything else that we've just been spending money on.
Okay. Well, what in particular, Steve? What do you think your punters want to hear? What do they want some help with?
So obviously food's important.
Yep.
I'm not sure that we're going to get any relief from rent or mortgage, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I know that Westpac is doing a deal where you can have 3 months of relief if you've lost X amount of income. Most people would be able to rationalize that they won't be able to go out and buy TVs and that sort of thing in this current climate. But what do you suggest is a priority?
Well, look, it's like any other time in life where you really want to get your financial health together. It's just that the pressure is on you right now to actually do it. So it's a case of really looking at what those things that you spend money on, out of those things that you spend money on, what are most important to you and your family. So typically will be your accommodation and your food, and the power on. So they would typically be the most important, possibly the health insurance. So look, and everything else, of course, typically would get thrown away. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, we're in a position right now where it's fairly socially unacceptable to leave the house. So most people are going to not be spending as much money by default. But if we look at those essentials in terms of your accommodation and power and phone and food, some of those, our service providers are normally pretty accommodating when we're struggling financially. So even if your mortgage document doesn't allow for 3 months off, don't be scared to ring the bank and ask them. Even if they haven't come out and said, it's off, paying their mortgages and we'll do this and that. If your bank hasn't said that, you can at least have a crack, give them a call, let them know your situation and see what they can do to help. Because most of them will.
Mm.
Most banks are not in the business of actually foreclosing and selling properties. They're in the business of getting money back. And that's what they want to do.
Of course. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, everyone's in the same boat, and they're going to be a little bit more lenient, I think.
Yeah, so
like you're going to default because you just can't be bothered to pay it.
Yeah, well, look, there's good and bad with everyone being in the same boat. The fact that everyone is in the same boat means whoever you ring at the bank would have heard the story before. But it also means that they're getting this story a lot. And, many will probably hate me for saying this, but the banks have only got so much money. And at so they do, of course, they need to recognize how they are going to help people, because what they do for one, probably they've got to do for many. And that could be very expensive for that business as well. And we've got to remember that we're the ones that owe them the money. They don't owe us the money. So,
that's true.
Whatever help we can get from the people who we owe money to, we should sort of accept it with gratitude, I say.
Great. And from a financial perspective, I'm hearing a lot of fear-mongering around we need to buy gold, we need to buy silver because we're going to go into a depression.
Mm-hmm.
How realistic is that in a general nature? I mean, obviously you can't give specific advice, but in a general nature, is it likely to go into a depression, and should we be buying gold and silver, or should we be investing in Australian shares instead, or anything at all?
Well, there's no question that now that's always a good time to invest. The only question is ever, well, where should you invest? because at different times, different markets are going to be doing well. And clearly at the moment, equity markets are not doing that great. And I don't say that because they are cheaper than they were a month ago, because definitely the smart people buy when things are cheaper, just like they buy their fuel when it's cheaper or their milk when it's cheaper. Now, whether or not we're going into a depression, I'm going to leave that for someone else. I'm not going to put that one out there. But there's no question we're up for at least a couple of quarters of negative growth, and maybe more than that. Now, there's, of course, a lot of stimulus from central banks around the world to try and combat that. And they'll be able to combat that to a certain extent, but they can't really combat it in terms of, they can't really make up for the lost wages and production of 30% of the world. That's a really big ask. So we need to face the fact that, there's going to be some quarters of negative growth, but what are we going to do to make the most of that? And what are we going to do to pull ourselves out of it on the other side in a pretty good place?
Yeah. And if you do have some cash, it is a good opportunity to buy into the market. Would you say that is accurate? Or?
Well, to buy in, Steve, look, to buy into some market, for sure. Whether or not the Australian equities or US equities are at a bottom, my crystal ball ain't working today, so I can't tell you that. But equity markets follow bond and credit markets, and equity markets will never be stabilised and offering growth until bond markets and credit markets have stabilised. And right now they haven't really, and that's the reason for a lot of the actions of the central banks around the world to try and get bond markets and credit markets to stabilise and come back into order, because then we'll start seeing some stability from share markets around the world. But that could be some time off yet.
And there's been this opportunity to access your super early. So we're buying big TVs with that, right?
Well, hopefully, because you can buy a kick-ass TV with 10 grand.
Yeah.
So the rules around that are you can access up to $10,000 of your super before June 30, and another 10,000 after June 30. Now, there's some rules around it, and you need to be able to satisfy those. And you'll be able to Google and find those pretty easily through various sites. Or if your punters come back to you, mate, I'm happy to help them. But there's some downside to that, though, because you got to remember that if you take the view that your super grows at sort of 8% per annum, well then $1,000 doubles every, in fact, any amount of money doubles every 9 years. So if you've got sort of 27 years left to retirement, your 10 grand is going to double 3 times in that time, which is $20,000, $40,000, $80,000. So if you took 10 grand out this year, that's effectively $8 grand that you're taking out of your account. If you take the full 20, well, of course, that's 160 grand you're taking out future dollars from your super. So before you rob yourself of 160 grand, make sure that it's really that you really need that 20 grand. That there's no other place that you can actually get that money from.
Yeah. So effectively, if you think of it as, all right, well, I've got a little bit of debt, so if I pull a little bit of money out and pay that debt, realistically, you're not taking, say, $1,000 to $2,000 out. You're really taking $9,000 out.
You could well be, yeah.
A small.
That's right. So that could well be false economy, couldn't
it? Yeah.
Unless you've got a bit of a strategy, if you know that your income's dropped for a period of time, but then it's going to pick back up in 6 or 12 months' time, maybe you could use it as a bit of a loan from your super fund and put it back in 6 months or 12 months. But there's not going to be any contract for you to do that. So you've got to have the discipline to actually make sure you follow through on that.
So it is a good way to get ahead. And one thing that I thought of doing is accessing the $10,000 if I'm able to, and putting it into Australian shares when things do get bad. That way, when the market picks back up, which it will, then I sell off $10,000 portion and put it back into my super.
Well, Steve, you could do that, or you could just buy those $10,000 worth of shares inside your super fund. It's a more concessionally taxed investment environment to buy the shares in the first place. Probably smarter just to leave it there, mate. If you just want to have the exposure to the Aussie shares.
Yep. Great. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So we spoke about super and how you should be informed before you access that. We spoke about how bad it's going to get, and no one's got a crystal ball, so we don't really know how bad it's going to get. Let's move back to the budget and sort of look at. Do you know of any options available to people to, I don't know, not have to pay their electricity for a little while, or how to minimize that? Or
Yep. The best thing that you can do is actually sit down either with yourself or with your partner if you're living with someone and work out actually how your cash flow is going to look over the next 6 months. So don't worry about what's happened in the last 6 months. Look at what is coming up. So when's my rego due? When are the rates due? When's the rent due, or whatever? And plot it out in fortnight lumps, if you like, over the next 6 months. So which dates are your incomes coming in? Which dates are your expenses going out? Because what you're going to find is some months you're going to have more bills than what you've got income. And at the moment, unfortunately, a lot of people are probably going to have more bills than income every month. So, but the importance of doing that is you can actually plot out when those expenses are coming in, take into account if you've got any savings and those sort of things. And then you can go, well, okay, how much can I afford? Can I afford all my bills? Right? So if you do that and you go, right, well, we can afford everything over the next 6 or 9 months, we've got no worries. If we're not going out to dinner and we're not buying coffees and whatever, well, then you've got no problem. But what it also will do is it might highlight that you're going to have a problem in August or July or September, because in that month, you've got the same amount of income as you had in June, but you've got an extra $2,000 worth of expenses for whatever reason, regos or house insurance or whatever comes up. So then you can start to look and you can go, well, we know that electricity providers, gas providers, phone services, those sort of service companies are often very happy just to take an amount of money from us every month and for us to pay it out over a period of time if that's what we need to do. So if you ring them armed with the right information that you know exactly what you can afford, then you can offer them that, more than likely accept it, and you can sort of sleep easy knowing that you're not going to get services cut off and it's all going to be taken care of. And it might be that in 9 months' time you might have racked up an extra few $100s that you haven't paid. If typically your electricity bill is $500 a quarter, but you can only afford to pay $250 a quarter at the moment, they'll probably let you do that. But it's of course, at some point you've got to make it up, and you'll probably need to say to whoever your power provider is, look, in month 9 we can start paying a bit more, or in month 8 or whatever. So you can actually give them some time horizon in terms of what it's going to take for you to pay the money. That you would then owe. Do I talk around in circles, or did that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And you've said a couple of times to communicate as well. Let's make this blatantly clear. Talk to your service providers.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the biggest takeaway that people can get from this is that if you talk to people, then at least they know what you're going through, and they will hopefully be able to do something with you about that situation.
That's right. And it's important for your punters to remember too, Steve, that a service provider cannot report you to a credit agency. If you keep talking to them and keep giving them money, it's really difficult for them to put a black mark on your credit report, even if it's only a little bit of money. If you're still contributing, it makes it a lot harder for you to get yourself into financial trouble.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Although I generally paid my bills on time. So
You crazy man.
Oh, I know. Ridiculous. Yeah. Cool.
Look, I think another, well, just because you haven't asked the question yet, so I'll answer it for you before you, in case you hadn't thought of it, Steve. But one of the things that's come up has been access to Centrelink services in the event you lose your job, or you've had your hours cut or whatever. Effectively, you're now either earning nothing or less than what you were, and how do you access Centrelink benefits? So we're under sort of time constraints in terms of, I can't go into an in-depth answer around that, but I just wanted people to understand that make sure you understand the rules before you go to Centrelink, because there are some things that you can do first to make sure you're in the best possible light. All right. So one of those things might be around holiday pay that you're owed by your employer or whatever. If he's prepared to pay your holiday pay, you may not be eligible for your Centrelink benefits. But if he's not in a position to pay holiday pay and he gives you a letter to that effect, well, then you may well have more chance with Centrelink. And then you've still got your holiday pay for when you go back to work in 6 months or 9 months or whatever it might be. So just be smart around, accessing that help, and try and do as much research as you can, or get in touch with someone who knows, and access that help smartly so that you don't undercut yourself.
And that applies to JobKeeper as well as JobSeeker.
Yeah. Anything like that. Just make sure, as much as you can, you're aware of these, the core rules, and aware of what you're entitled to before you even go to Centrelink. Now, Centrelink are not in the business of ripping people off. They do get things wrong quite often, but they will fix it. However, they will pay you by the letter of the law, and Centrelink law is fairly complex, but you probably can get some help in terms of putting yourself in the best position to get the best help.
Yeah, you've sort of got to think of them as the Hitchhiker's Guide from the Galaxy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. The bureaucratic race, who... Yep. Even to the point where they're supposed to be chasing after this, the main characters, but they have to go to lunch first because that's what's been mandated. They're not out to cheat anyone. They've got a specific set of instructions and they follow them to the letter.
Absolutely. Yep. So we can use that to our advantage, but we've got to know what those instructions are before we can use it to our advantage.
Right. All right. Do you have anything else to add?
Oh, mate, I'm a wealth of information, but look, not off the top of my head, but I'm quite happy if your punters fire questions at you. Quite happy for you to forward them on, and happy to answer questions that way if you wish.
Excellent. You heard the man. If you've got any questions, then either send me a message or comment below. I'll be tagging Darren into this as well, so he'll receive them as well. Great. Thanks, Darren.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. See you soon, mate.